collectively as a society divert resources to one thing, it should be education. Hands
Mhm.
down, that is the single most important thing that will change your life. Uh,
Education pays society
yes,
back.
that
Like,
actually you are correct. If it's done right, if it's done the way the U.S. does it, it doesn't. Yeah, but generally, if you have a really good education, it's a net positive.
I've been in the private school realm as well. Um, and I grew up thinking, oh, I'm like a year ahead of everyone. I'm smarter than everyone and everything. And like it really just depends on the subject matter.
What was taught in school did not prepare me for life outside of school. That's my point. Because it's like you got to ask the question, if you're creating a system of education, what is the purpose of that?
Okay, party people, it is another kitchen sink microscopy. I know you're just as excited as I am. I'm Casey Rochford, and this is my Rochford beer, so you know who I am. And we would really enjoy your company as a subscriber. And as a subscriber, you should hit that little like button because that pumps up the algorithm and does good things for us. And then share too, because that does the same thing, and it tells your buddies, and your buddies tell their buddies, and yeah,
Word of
that's how
mouth.
it works.
Yeah, word of mouth is great. Yeah, and leave a comment down there too. That helps keep the conversation going and stuff, as we always say. And I'm Eric Rosenblatt, and so Casey and I we write our own music, and there's probably going to be a new song maybe at the end of the episode, or a song you haven't heard in a while, or maybe some really obscure something or other. But we will put part of that song in there, and you can get it if you want lots of songs. I think iTunes and Spotify, right? You can,
Yep, yep.
and I think we have
Trying to
links, right?
trying to bust out some like re-recordings of our 20th anniversary album, so maybe there'll be something there.
Yeah, nice. All right. Well, Casey, what do you want to talk about today? What's on your mind?
Well, there's one that we've had on the list for a long time, kind of a hot button issue with some people, more of a philosophical question, and that is uh and of course not that this has to be one or the other, but what is better, equality or equity?
Ooh, that is. I mean that's a pretty deep question, and plus it's also I think important to define those things because from
Hmm,
what I think for a lot of people they're not really. It's not very clear what it means.
right.
Um,
It's not
and
equity in your house. It's
yeah, yeah, social equity
yeah,
essentially.
yeah.
Well, yeah, and I've always kind of understood like so equality is basically everybody is treated the same and you pretty much have the same options and opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of what I understand it to mean. And equity is the attempt to achieve the same level for everybody in a multitude of factors, whatever it might be.
Yeah,
Like
it
economic
yeah,
equity would be everybody makes the same amount of money, basically, or something. Um,
right. Yeah. I mean, it's hmm, I mean, I don't know if it would be quite like that.
mhm.
It's more about like seeing a goal where you want everyone to at least have the a chance to achieve that as a bare minimum, right?
Mhm.
Like the institution of the minimum wage kind of started out that way, right? Like
Mhm.
it was, you know, this wage should be enough to raise a family, buy a house, have a car,
Hmm.
It doesn't do any of those things anymore. um
No, no.
so I mean, that's kind of what it is. It's kind of like setting a bar and helping people get to that bar, whatever help they need, if any.
Hmm.
And that's kind of how I like to see it.
I think that's pretty fair too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and
Whereas
again,
equality is more like, it's not about like what you're giving to people. It's more just about like, not discriminating
yeah,
from one person to the next. So
exactly. The concept of equality exists in the negative, basically,
yeah,
in that what
yeah,
you don't do to people, like
yeah,
no discrimination, that kind of thing.
right. And I personally don't believe that equity is actually different from equality, but equality can be different from equity.
Well, I don't think that they're mutually exclusive, but I don't necessarily think they're necessarily intertwined either.
Yeah.
I mean, they're very there are crossovers, there's parts that overlap, I think, but
Hmm.
they're definitely entirely different in their in concept. I think like the application of those things,
Yeah.
because
So,
like equity, for instance, requires action, whereas equality is inaction, essentially.
yeah. Yeah, I would say that's probably pretty accurate most of the time. Um, yeah. I mean, okay, so let's look at some like real world examples. Affirmative action, what would you say that falls under the category of, more equity or
That would be
equality?
more equity. Yeah. Equality
Yeah.
would be basically like you not like we do not discriminate. It's like we don't even ask your gender or your race or anything. And
Hmm.
like your application for say college or something is like redacted essentially. So we don't even know anything about you other than your academic capabilities or goals.
Hmm.
Uh, Whereas equity would involve expressly finding out those things and saying, well, we're going to make sure that whatever social groups that we are concerned with, that everybody, we have at least this many of these groups all together, like, so it's the same proportion or something. Um,
Yeah. So yeah. So I'm very much a an advocate for the concept of equity, but there are systems in place that I think aren't, you know, totally perfect for
yeah,
achieving that.
you don't say.
Um, yeah, like the concept of having a certain amount of people represented in things.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I think it's
mm,
fair. Well, for instance, if you had perfect equality, right, then say in a college, the number of students should generally be reflective proportionally of the wider population. Um, Although that does depend because it's like, well, who wants to go to college? Who has opportunities? That could change depending
yeah.
on socioeconomic kinds of conditions or cultural things.
Hmm.
So you may see deviation from that, but you would have that in general. Uh,
Hmm.
and I see like to me, I kind of agree with the idea of something, say like affirmative action, but only for like a temporary thing to kind of give society a little boost after, say, like we had the civil rights movement and stuff, and
Hmm.
there we were trying to overcome a long history of cultural, you know, funkiness, people, racism, and all that stuff. And so, kind of like making it kind of a forced thing
Yeah.
for a time makes sense. But I think after a certain amount of time, you've already overcome those differences and changed. It's like a whole different generation now, and it's probably not necessary. Um,
Yeah. Well, I mean,
at least it shouldn't be necessary. Like
right.
if it's done right, it shouldn't be necessary.
I've worked at companies where they are strictly adhering to that concept, and I remember hearing conversations amongst managements when they were at the hiring process, and they said like, well, the candidate we want, It's like perfect.
Mhm.
But, it's a white person, and we're at a point in our staffing where we have to hire somebody else. Now, imagine your luck. Like if one of those people happens to be applying for this position,
Yeah.
like what do you do if they don't? Like if you don't have any applicants for that, what are you supposed to do?
Well,
Like,
and
is
that's what I
there?
was saying about like the college thing. Like culturally, some people, or just general education, maybe people aren't interested or don't have the skills or something.
Mm-hmm.
And but you know,
But you don't get the best person for the job necessarily,
well,
though.
that's a good point. And
I mean, maybe you do in the end, but
perhaps,
like the person you think would be better,
yeah. Well,
you
like
can't
if you hire
hire.
somebody who's already coming with a good skill set, then obviously that's a huge benefit.
Right.
The thing I don't like about affirmative action is and similar things like that is that it's sort of kind of it, it, it's selective in a way that seems very bigoted. Like it, to me, it's like for instance, college, right? The concern should not be what the color of your skin is or what language you speak or where your family hails from or something like that. It should be socioeconomic, right? Like, hey, we want to give everybody a chance to get in here and get an education. So if we're going to be focused on anything, it should just be like people who otherwise couldn't afford to get in here, whatever they look like, because
Yeah.
that really is a huge barrier to go into college or even a trade school. Is like how you don't have the money to spend to do that, like
Right.
a poor family or something, or somebody that's just on their own and they're like, I'm working this dead end job and I need to better myself. Well, they don't have the extra financial resources to do that. And I'm all for that. I am not for it being forced, but I'm for it being something that people like to do, right? Like a
Mm-hmm.
college would want that. And I think they probably would, because it's like there are a lot of brilliant minds that never get a chance to shine because they just don't have the money. There's also a lot of
Yeah.
idiots that if they're never going to do anything with their life, so pigeonholing them into a college is kind of pointless.
So there's the philosophy in much of Europe where the fix for that, so you don't have to like create this bigoted selection process, is to just remove the financial barrier across the board. Like
Mm-hmm.
up to a certain age, anyone can go to college for free. You
Yeah.
know, like and of course everyone's like, oh, where will the money come from and stuff like that, and like
I mean, I think it's a
then that
valid
becomes
question.
the focus of the conversation, and it's like, well, what's really important here? Like
Mhm.
a smarter society, or some people like staying rich, you know
Well, as long as the education system provides a good education, I think it probably is one of the most important. Like, if we are to collectively, as a society, divert resources to one thing, it would should be education, hands
mm-hmm.
down. That is the single most important thing that will change your life, anybody's life. Like because the impediments to progress, if you want to make more money or something like that, or pursue a particular career, um, it's knowledge. It's always knowledge. Like getting out of poverty, it only comes down to knowledge. Well, okay, if you live in an oppressive place in the world where you just simply can't because
Mm-hmm.
well, you might be shot or something, or that kind of thing, then that's different. But in say like the U.S. or Europe or something, like that's not really a thing. But it all comes down to knowledge, really. And I think we as a society will always be better off, um, with everybody being more wise and knowledgeable. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that like if every single person were lifted up, like everybody got a stellar education and knew as much as they need to know, um, we would be well, we'd already be colonizing other worlds by now. We'd probably have like warp drive and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
But so I mean, I'm completely fine with that being a thing that a society like does as like probably the only thing that I think is really worthy of collectively doing is providing a very good
Yeah.
education.
But you know what? Like, a lot of people would probably say that the European way of doing things, or at least German and Sweden, as far as I know, personally,
Mm.
um, a lot of people would probably say that's an example of equity. But to me, that sounds more like equality, and it's the inequality that achieves equity.
Mm-hmm.
In the fact that like it just removes the barrier so that anybody that wants to can do it, but it's an equal treatment.
Yeah.
So like it is both.
Yeah, and in
And
that sense, it certainly is. I see your argument there. I think that's it's fairly accurate.
Mhm.
I mean,
and
the
and I
important
mean that's a good goal to achieve, right? Like to be equality and equity hand in hand
well,
to
you
provide something as important as education.
yeah, I mean, ultimately, you do achieve that with education.
Mhm.
I mean, because you proper education can also remove those sort of biases that people have about other people, right?
Yeah.
So you come out from school and now you're world wise and appreciate everybody and treat them as all equals and that kind of thing. Uh,
Education pays society
yes,
back.
that
Like,
actually you are correct. If it's done right, if it's done the way the U.S. does it, it doesn't. Yeah, but generally, if you have a really good education, it's a net positive. Like,
mhm.
sure, it costs a lot of money. Like, you go to places like Sweden and their tax rate is just super high. Um, and but it, like they have a good education system.
Mhm.
So does Japan too, although they have culturally it's a little uh, aggressive when it comes to performance in school. Uh,
Right. Yeah.
but like that's the thing. If the education system provides a proper education, not just filling your head full of useless details and making you take tests and stuff like that, but actually guiding you and giving you a good toolbox to deal with life, you know, and a broader understanding of the world around you and the cosmos and stuff, and even smaller things like how electricity works and things, machines and stuff. Like all of that will certainly be it'll be a synergistic effect. You'll get out a lot more than you're putting in,
Mhm.
essentially, and that's a good thing. And of course, here's the other side benefit: if you do that, then society as a whole becomes more productive, and thereby,
Mhm.
then there's more resources available to continue paying for education, like
Right.
out of everybody paying for it. Um, and that's a pretty difficult thing to answer because it's like how would you really ensure that you're getting that the education that's being provided is good? Because like in the US it's like we are essentially forced to pay for it, even if you aren't putting kids in school, if you don't have kids. But it is available, everybody can go. um,
Mhm.
but the thing is, I went through public education and it sucks. Like I mean, I learned some stuff, but really most of the stuff that I know now I learned independent of the education system. And
Well,
that's sad because we, you're in there for so long, we should have enough, that's enough time for people to basically be a bunch of super geniuses. uh, if I sat for
nah,
12 years on that site brilliant
that's
and
not the point though. Like at that age, uh, you can't really say for sure each person is going to be like, let's say, blossomed enough to retain or process or like draw, connect the dots between things, right? Like school at that age is a lot more about social learning. It's about learning to get along with people. It's about learning to work with authority,
Well,
and
it's also about learning the basics as well. Like especially
yeah,
elementary and middle school, you kind of learn like the basics and maybe cover a whole bunch of different subjects so that you get a
yeah.
little bit of understanding.
Honestly, public school doesn't do that bad a job. I've been in the private school realm as well. Um, and I grew up thinking, oh, I'm like a year ahead of everyone. I'm smarter than everyone and everything. And like it really just depends on the subject matter
Yeah,
because
true.
there are things that they just maybe, let's say, accelerate on, but don't necessarily teach better. Because I actually strongly believe that private schools are kind of a detriment. Um,
Really?
yeah, but there are plenty of places where I was like way behind, like math and stuff, like kind of important stuff, right? Where I had to kind of do a lot of catching up. I didn't really even catch up until college. Like it it took a lot of years for me to get to a point where my brain was just kind of like ready for that. And
Well, and
uh,
that is, you're right. Like it does certainly depend on the person.
mhm.
But I mean, my point was basically like what was taught in school did not prepare me for life outside of school. That's my point. Because it's like you got to ask the question, if you're creating a system of education, what is the purpose of that?
Yeah,
What do we hope to gain by providing an education for everybody?
yeah, but I mean that wouldn't happen in any other system. Like you don't see that happen in private schools. You don't see it happen in homeschools for sure. Like you can only teach so much,
Well, it
as
could,
as a person.
sure, sure. But it's more, you could certainly provide better life skill information in, say, like a homeschool, but you can't guarantee that that's happening because everybody's different.
Right.
And who know, if you have to know these things to be able to teach those things. That's,
It's a monumental task
yeah,
to, if you're lucky enough to not have to work yourself and you can stay home and teach your kid all day, well, that's the first hurdle.
mm-hmm.
But then from there, like you also have to like create this dynamic where during a certain time the parent child relationship is kind of absent and you take on a teacher student role,
Yeah,
and there's
becomes
got to
more
be like
formal.
discipline and like focus
Mm-hmm.
on both ends, like you've got to be able to like discipline yourself to stick to it and be strict with it and stuff, and if you don't, like you're just harming your child. I've seen that happen time and time. I've never seen a good homeschool product.
Well, I
And
have,
that's
and
anecdotal, but like,
well, I have, but it's been in slightly, it's not like a one-on-one. More in the case of like a bunch of homeschool parents will like create a basically a club or a group.
mhm,
So it's like they
yeah,
go to somebody's house and this person's the teacher and everybody's there. And so it's like you
yep,
get that sort of small classroom kind of thing. And so like maybe different
yeah,
parents
that's
have
good.
different
Yeah,
skill sets. And so, hey, today we're gonna go over to Timmy's mom's house and she's gonna teach us about, you know, whatever she knows, mathematics. She's excellent in math. And so
right,
that
right.
we're going to learn math here and then we're going to go over to there and this, so and so's dad will be teaching us about astronomy or something, that kind of thing.
And see,
And,
that's good. That's more of a top down equity if you
mm-hmm,
think about it. Like,
yeah,
that's providing a well rounded um, opportunity for children, as opposed to just like a, an echo chamber,
mm-hmm,
essentially. Because like your own biases and
mm-hmm.
your own uh, you know uh, detriments in your education are passed along if you don't have other people to lean on for your weaknesses and stuff.
Sure. Well, and even just your own methodology of learning or teaching,
Mhm.
there could certainly be shortcomings there, and yeah, But you're right that certainly in a one-on-one situation that there will be bias injection for sure. If somebody's really big on, say, like a religion or something, they're going to focus heavily on that and less on the more academic side of things.
Yep. And I see that a lot.
Well, and you'll find that homeschooling is much more prevalent amongst religious people.
Yeah, it's actually against the law here in Germany.
Oh yeah,
um, which I honestly can see the argument for it, because like it really, they're all about like being able to show that you know what you're doing here.
mm-hmm.
And you can't really enforce that with homeschooling. Like it's, you can say, hey, you got to like get this license or whatever and prove this and that, but like after that,
Well,
what kind of
standardized testing, I suppose, could do that. Like, well, you can continue
that's
to
bullshit
homeschool.
too.
Well, that
Like
kind of as it
if you
stands.
want to go back to equality and equity, like that's just equality top down. That's
Well,
like we're going to give the same test to everybody, and it's like, what is
except
that
then,
really showing you? You know,
but then how do you measure education metrics if a
why do
standardized
you have
test is
to?
bad? Well, we just said that they were they want to show you got to show your progress or something like that. How do they measure that without having some kind of
Yeah, I mean, of course you like have to demonstrate skill at some point, but like as far as like grades and scores and percentiles and all this stuff, that's like, yeah, more competitive than anything.
Yes, that is, and that's kind of nonsense. And but
Yeah.
my point about testing though would be more just to measure that things are hunky dory, right? Like, oh
Yep.
yeah,
Right.
you're
Yeah.
progressing well. And honestly, it should be more like you remember back in like high school and stuff, you took some kind of sport, like a sports oriented class. Like I took weightlifting, and it never was about comparing one student to another, how much they could lift or whatever. It was about comparing yourself at the
Right.
beginning to yourself later.
Yep.
So if you improve, that was good. Like, hey, you're building your strength and you're able to do a lot more. I like in the beginning, I remember we had to do this thing where we hold just the bar up and it was like 40 pounds and almost everybody was like shaking, trying to hold it steady,
Yeah.
just the bar. But by the end, it was like I was like doing like these leg presses with like 300 pounds without any effort. It was like so easy. And
Yeah. I mean, imagine a schooling system where, the concept of equity was kind of built in to uh, the learning process. Like the entire class takes a test and little Timmy doesn't do so good.
mm,
So the teacher said, like, like right now it's all about privacy, right? Like, don't tell anyone what your grade is. Don't tell people what you make at your job and blah, blah, blah. But instead, if the teacher was like, Timmy didn't seem to understand this, let's spend today and each work with him and see if somebody has a way to explain it to him that he'll understand, and like get the students to like engage in that and have a day kind of free of learning. And it's more about teaching, because you actually learn so much when you teach others.
oh yeah. Well, so
And
have the students essentially become temporary tutors,
exactly.
which I mean that does
and
make sense.
and it's all about leaving no one behind. It's all about like working together with your peers and
Mm-hmm.
making sure that they're at the same level of understanding that you
Well,
are.
that,
And
that ultimately, that's the thing. Like that provides a net positive effect.
yeah.
So you give of yourself a little bit to lift somebody up, and that in exchange, like right, the tide rises that much more, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody's a little bit better off.
Yeah.
And even just it's like simple things like helping somebody overcome a lack of understanding of a particular method or topic or subject or whatever. Um, yeah, that can have a profound effect on
Yeah.
their future to the day they die.
Yeah.
you know?
And I mean, like that takes away like fears and stuff, like, and there's so many people that by the time they reach high school, they hate school, like they,
Well, that probably has a lot to do with society's expectation of like, oh, you got to get good grades.
Oh,
They send the
exactly.
report card home and your parents punish you if you get like a C or something, that kind of thing. It's seen as like it's stigmatized essentially,
Mhm.
like failure to perform. But like the thing is that what that is, all that is an indication that you need more, right? Like there's
Mhm.
nothing wrong with saying, and the three most terrifying words for students is I don't know. Or for most people in general, like they want to know, they want to have the answer. And it's like, well, it's okay to say I don't know. It's okay to not understand something and comprehend something. Like
Yeah.
that's fine. Then
Thinking back, thinking back to my years in school, college, high school, all of it, I have always actually kind of taken that approach where like if I saw somebody struggling, I would kind of speak up and try to give them my own, like I'd raise my hand and start addressing the teacher, but then kind of turn my attention to them and just start explaining it to them. Like if they had a question and the teacher seemed to be kind of struggling. And
mhm.
sometimes that was well received by the teacher and sometimes not. And it's like, let go of the ego, right? Like let other people help you teach, you
Well,
know?
yeah, exactly. And that goes back to my question, which I don't know if we'd ever be able to quite answer, but like, what is the point of education? What is the purpose of education? What outcome do we hope to achieve with it?
Mm-hmm.
To take somebody who knows nothing, what happens? What is the goal on the other end when they come through that system, that machine? Is it to have people that I mean, because currently, like in the US, my experience in public education has been it's basically to come out with of good grades, basically.
Yeah.
That's pretty much all that was ever anybody's concern. Nobody was, they didn't teach you in an inspiring way. It was like, for me, mathematics was always drudgery because the way it
Yeah.
was taught was boring. It was like all about numbers and stuff. And after high school, well, and kind of during, because I was doing a lot of programming and 3D modeling and stuff that was like kind of new at the time. Um, I started to gain an appreciation for mathematics, and now I love it. Like I don't still understand as much as I'd like to, but it's like now it's not something that's laborious, but it's actually fascinating and really, really interesting. And that didn't happen because I got a good education. That happened because I just happened upon the right set of circumstances that open my eyes to the wonders that is mathematics.
It's interesting that like the topic of equality and equity heavily centers around education.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, I don't find it to be that surprising, honestly, because that is
no,
the key to achieving that, really. Like I
yeah,
said,
like it really honestly is like, and the examples we've been giving, like this idea of top down equality and top down equity and stuff like that, like the way that you are presenting information
mhm.
to the youth is sort of setting a precedent
Yeah.
for what they come to expect in society and what they come to give to others
And
in
what they expect
society.
from themselves, too.
Yeah.
Like grades were everything. I know in Japan, there's a huge
Oh yeah.
problem of people, get a bad grade and you jump off a building, basically.
Mm-hmm.
You've shamed your family or whatever. And
Yeah.
that's
But
stupid.
at the same time, they do have, pretty impressive results with education too.
Well, they're probably their methodology and what they teach is probably a little more effective or broad or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Certainly, when it comes to technical things, um, yeah. But I see. To me, I think one of the shortcomings of most public education systems, like we're talking about achieving equity, I think it's like you're saying the base level, say like economic equity. It's like, oh, everybody should have this, like out of the gate by default. Everybody's at least this. The floor is this high, essentially, or the lower rung of the ladder. Like it's that kind of thing.
Mm.
Um, I I think we can like education. Like I said, I think it's the most important thing ever for a society is education. But we need to also make sure that the things that we're teaching the youth are also things like life skills that essentially everybody coming out of school, right? When you've gone through and you're out the other end and you've graduated, everybody has the same set of tool like skills, essentially the ability to do various things and comprehend things that have nothing to do with academics but have to do with like just general life, right?
Yeah.
how do
Yeah.
you how do you do your taxes, how do you budget, how like basic maintenance of things, giving people a fundamental understanding of like the stuff that they use every day, so it's not like a complete mystery.
Yeah.
How to change a tire, how to not be scammed when you go into an auto shop, that kind of thing.
These
uh,
kinds of topics always make me think like we need to revive Kitchen Sink University.
mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah,
Because
exactly.
like there was a Mork and Mindy like outro. Remember when Mork would be like reporting back to his planet
Mm-hmm.
about humanity and stuff. And this has been circulating around the internet in the last couple of weeks. I've seen it a couple times. And Mork is saying like humans are interesting. They tell their children don't talk to strangers, and then when they get to school, don't talk to your neighbors. And then as they become elderly, it's don't talk to yourself. Well, who's left?
That's a
And
good wow.
that's a great point.
Mm-hmm.
Because like if we were at that stage of like education,
Mm-hmm.
instead telling people, encouraging them to talk to their neighbors and teach each other, like that would go a long way to like, if the goal were about where you began and where you end up rather than numbers and hitting certain milestones, I think that would actually go much farther because I used to do some like amateur bodybuilding, and it was a huge inspiration to see my own results and compete with myself from the previous day
Yeah,
and see if I could do a little better than I did yesterday and stuff.
just one
That
more rep.
Yeah, that takes you so much farther
Mm-hmm.
than being like, okay, I did the bare minimum. I'm good. Now I can veg out or whatever. Like,
Yeah, yeah. Maybe in education, it should be less about just the pure numbers as it compares to other people, but
yeah,
it should be compared to yourself.
getting a trophy is so much more hollow than getting a good feeling about yourself.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
Trophies don't give you good feelings about yourself,
No.
especially when every single person gets them. Like,
Mm-hmm. Well, and like helping others is another thing that provides a good feeling.
mm-hmm. Oh
Um,
yeah, the
well, like
spirit of Christmas, right?
exactly. Yeah. But like from like one of the things that I noticed with the education system, at least in the US, is it's very heavily focused on just pure academics, even though it really isn't, but it pretends to be.
Yeah,
Um, and but it's that all that stuff is useful. It's useful to know. It's obviously good to know about mathematics and history and some science and stuff and all those things. Obviously, learning about your own language more is helpful. But there's more to it than that, because those things alone, if you just threw somebody out, like they graduated and you threw them naked on the street, like here you go, off you go, you're all prepared for life, they would not survive.
mm-hmm.
They don't have the knowledge to be able to start from zero and build up from there. And I think that that's the key to achieving equity is providing all that in your education that we're all paying for.
Yeah,
I want to see everybody come out as like an army of one, essentially. Like you don't necessarily like. Obviously, you need to interact with people, right? And work with people and people need to work with you to achieve things, but you should already know what to do. Like, okay, all of us know that we have a common goal. We've already gone through this exercise before. It's like being in the military. Like, you know, you don't have to sit there and have a conversation about what you're going to do before an assault. You've already
Mhm.
gone through training, and it's you're running on autopilot.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you know, you need to field strip your gun. You don't have to like think about it and open a manual. You've done it 1,000 times before. Like, and that's how we should treat schooling for life. Like, it should be, you should be able to come out of school and have the base level of knowledge to be able to do anything. Like, you
Yeah.
know all how all the stuff works. Like, not intimately, but it'd be like, I'd like, pretty much what I'd like to see is everybody come out of, like, say, high school, or let's say, who knows, whatever end point you have for your education system. Everybody should come out as basically a polymath. Like, they don't have to be 100% like, oh man, you're expert level on everything, but they should at least be like intermediate level on everything.
Well, here's what I think. The end should be whenever the kid wants it to be. Like
Yeah.
if the kid says I've chosen the path, like let's say at some point in school they decide what they want to do with their life, or they
Mm.
don't, you know, whatever that point may be, and it doesn't have to be at the same time for everybody.
No.
They can start doing more of an a la carte selection of what classes they're taking.
Mm.
And at some point, if they say to their homeroom teacher or whatever, you know what, I think I'm ready to like go out and find a job in my chosen career,
Mm.
then they take this test, or you know, like enter some sort of practicum apprenticeship or something,
Yeah.
you know, and see for sure whether or not they can make it, and then they're good, you know, like
Yeah. As soon as they've demonstrated that, like, they're independent of that, they don't need any further education. I
yeah.
could see that. Yeah. And because, you know, honestly, school, different people learn at different paces and in different ways. So I think, like, there's no shame in continuing staying
Like
in
why
school until
have
you've got it
different
hammered down.
colleges, like high schools and colleges and elementary schools? Why not? Why can't it just be a school?
Yeah.
Like, and you go as far as you can fucking go.
Sure. Well, and
Like,
okay, so I would say, as long as you have the base level life skill knowledge base, like, as long as that is, like, up to speed, then sure, then whenever, honestly, if you can demonstrate all those things and you have a comprehension of all those things, then yeah, it doesn't
right.
have to be at a
That's
particular date.
that's a good point. It's not just about what career you choose, but it's also like, okay, show me you could do your taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Show me you know how to like change a flat tire, blah blah blah. You know,
Yeah,
like
yeah, exactly. Like,
things that like, you know, of course, like in this day and age, like people don't really have to rely on themselves for as much as we did or our parents did, or,
mm-hmm.
and so on and so forth. But it is nice to have that knowledge. It can be applied to other things.
Well, yeah, because I feel like, you know, because if, say, somebody, well, I'm going to go and do these things, and you know, you demonstrated that you basically Doogie Howser, right? Like, oh,
Yeah.
you're a surgeon at like age 19 or something. Um, well, uh, but if you don't know how to budget, well, you're no use to society, right? You're actually going to be a drag. So we want
But
everybody
not
to
that
be
big of
able.
a drag. I mean, you
Well, it
hire an
depends.
accountant or whatever. Like,
Well, I mean, but it depends. I mean, that's just one example, but like,
yeah,
or if you say you're going to be like a mechanic or something like that, like, there's all kinds of different
yeah,
options there. But that's my point, is, in order to actually achieve equity, this is necessary. Everybody should be on the same level, at least. Like, there should be a lower threshold that we consider to be adequate, that everybody knows how to do all this stuff. And no one is naive or ignorant of any of these things, because all of us, the whole society, we all know these things. And at that point, it's like, yeah, basically we'd have equity. Because a lot of things, like people struggling with money and poverty and stuff, it really comes down largely to knowledge. Like, it's basically ignorance about how to, like, what direction to go to extricate yourself from that situation.
Yeah.
Same thing as like, you say like, I don't know, tactical stuff or survival stuff, like people walking out into the woods on a day hike and they don't bring anything. And it's like, or they don't even know, they have no fundamental skills and they get lost and die in the middle of the wilderness. Well, if you just simply had some knowledge and some skills and had done it before, like, oh yeah, I'm going to make a fire, I'm going to set up a shelter and let's find water and da da da. Like, you'd already know how to do those things, and you'd know what to do. You would survive. And that's kind of more of like a deviant example, I guess. But I mean, the same applies to pretty much everything in life. Like how to not be scammed. How about that as a life skill?
Well,
How
I
many
mean, like
people?
critical thinking is all you need for that. And
Yes.
that would be something I definitely think should be taught.
Oh,
Not just as like, people say, oh, well, as part of the education system, you learn critical thinking in your regular lessons. Well,
no, you don't.
yes and no. Yes and
Yeah.
no. It really depends on how much you're paying attention, how much you kind of see that for yourself.
Well,
Like,
that's the thing is like people may learn critical thinking in a particular aspect, but
right.
it's not universal.
Yeah.
Like you should have a universal critical thinking mindset
Yeah.
that applies to 100% of your life, always
Like
thinking critically.
I'm critical thinking class in college years old. Like I actually took a class in critical thinking. I
Mhm.
don't think they exist anymore, um, which is sad. I
Yeah.
mean, at least at the college I took it at, they completely took away the philosophy department entirely. But that
Well,
was that was a turning point in my life.
oh
Like
yeah, for
I,
sure.
I count that as one of the most important times of my life.
Well, how many people did not take the critical thinking course and are basically the way you were before taking that course?
Yeah, yeah,
Probably most of them.
uh-huh. Yeah.
And
I
so
mean,
if you have,
eventually you learn this stuff the hard way, but
mhm.
like
Well,
it's nice to kind of get that sort of thinking about thinking
sure,
drilled into your head.
and that should be ingrained in every single course. And
Mhm.
also, like, I think too, kind of making it so that learning isn't drudgery but fun. Like
Yeah,
making like the exploration of the world around us is exciting. And
right.
in that, what you do is you inspire people, like even once they're out of school, they will continue to
Yeah,
learn and teach themselves things because they were taught that learning is fun and that there's a lot
right,
of interesting stuff out there. But what ends up happening, people get out of school and they stop learning. Like they may
right.
learn some things about like their particular field that they're working in, but like that's pretty much it. Oh, they just sit there and watch the news all day or watch football or something. And it's like that's it. Just their education halts when they leave school, and
Yeah,
that's harmful, I think,
yeah.
because
Well,
you can.
take required reading, for example. Like,
Mhm.
I don't remember jack shit from Catcher in the Rye. I had to read it, I think.
Yeah,
I
same
don't
here.
even remember entirely if I even had to read it. But it's like the the point I'm driving at is like, why not let the children decide
Hmm.
what they want to read and make a case for why? Like I feel like this appeals to me because, or I might learn from this, such and
Hmm.
such sort of thing. And then they'll have a genuine interest in reading these
Oh yeah.
things. Like my stepdaughter right now is having to read something for English,
Hmm.
um, being German. It's an English book,
Yeah.
and I read as much as she's read up to this point to see what it's kind of about because she was like, it's kind of strange and I'm not really interested. Why would I ever read this book?
Mhm.
And I mean, it's like I see what it's kind of about. It's more like a coming of age sort of story that might make a case for like you're not alone. Like everybody feels this
Mhm.
sort of thing in your age and blah, blah, blah. Like I get that. But like it, even if I get it, that doesn't matter. It doesn't really speak to her.
It's not resonating,
Yeah.
right?
So like that's not doing any good. Um,
Sure.
it's just miserable for her, and it's not gonna teach her what she needs to learn.
Yeah, and I would say like required
I don't
reading
even know
for
what they want her to learn from that,
yeah,
honestly.
I'd say like required reading for like say a whole class reading a specific book um, makes sense early on when you're still kind of developing your understanding of the language. Like, oh,
Yeah,
we're all gonna read this together, and then that
reading
maybe
together,
there's
sure. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
But as you get older, I think allowing people to strike out a little bit more and venture into other things, as long as you're reading something, I think that's really the important thing. Uh,
see, spot, run, run, spot, run.
exactly. Well, and I think, yeah, like because there's, well, reading Rainbow. I mean, I grew up on that,
Oh
and
yeah.
actually, in fact, simply showing episodes of Reading Rainbow as a class would probably suffice because that show, LeVar Burton, like he inspires you to want to read and to
Mm-hmm.
explore and to learn. And books contain the totality of human experience and knowledge. Um, and and so yeah, like you could explore the world in your living room, in your own mind,
Oh yeah.
through
Oh yeah.
books.
I read so much as a kid, and a lot of it was because of LeVar,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I just genuinely enjoyed like learning
Mm-hmm.
in general. Um, I would go to the library often with my mom and check out books and stuff, and and I'd go up to the counter and put my books up there, and the librarian would be like, "You're gonna read all these?" And I was like, "Yeah."
Nerd.
But I mean,
It's
you
okay.
know, I didn't
I am
read
too.
like front to back every single book, but like, you know, you don't have to, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you read just a like, don't feel like it's a useless endeavor if you don't finish a book
No, no. Well,
or
okay.
if you don't finish anything.
For
Like,
storybooks, I think it's kind of important to go from in a linear fashion. But
mhm,
informational books, yeah. Like when I was a kid, my dad had these two books about ninjas.
mhm,
And I started reading those when I was a little tiny kid, like basically elementary school. And, I'd pick it up and open to a section and look at the pictures of all the ninja stuff.
and
And
then the book vanished.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But I read, and it was mostly history, a lot
Mhm.
of history, and maybe some information about ninjas in general and stuff. But I became fascinated with that, and yeah, I mean, I didn't start at the beginning and read the foreword and then go all the way through. Like, no, I would just open it and randomly and read a section for a while and flip around and stuff,
Mhm.
and that was sufficient. I mean, you could do that with any subject, really. If it's an educational thing, you
Oh
pick
yeah.
up like a calculus textbook and start at the very end and be like, "Whoa, this is where. Oh, geez, I this makes no sense. How does
That's
that work?"
actually no, that's actually a good exercise because like if you genuinely want to figure it out, it's kind of fun to it's kind of fun to look at the answer and then try to work backwards because
Yeah,
that's a great way to learn too.
sure.
Uh,
Well,
you know,
yeah,
it's not
knowing
cheating.
how.
It's not cheating
No,
to
no, because it's showing you the how and why and things like
yeah.
that.
And that's why they put the answers in the back of math books at like a
Mhm.
certain point anyway.
Yeah,
Um, you know, it's so that you can see if you're right. And the point of math is to show that your process of getting there is is
functional.
yeah. Like and
Well, so
sometimes there are incorrect ways to get to the correct answer.
well, that's true. Now, funny story here. Um, I like really struggled with math in high school. And I remember I barely passed pre-algebra and I was taking algebra 1 and it just did not, we got to a point where it started sounding like gibberish to me. I could not wrap my head around some of this stuff. So, and I happen to have this little Radio Shack pocket computer. So you could program it in assembly or basic, a very simple one line screen. But you could create some pretty advanced programs on it. And so, you had to show your work, right? As
Yeah.
oh, you can't just put the answer, you got to show your work in there. So I wrote a program to solve these equations. Um, and my work was writing the program down on the piece of paper. And the teacher was like, I can't give you credit for that, but I mean, technically, that's correct. And I'm like, well, hey, I solved it, right? Isn't the whole point to get like to be able to do this? What's wrong with doing it programmatically? Like
Okay,
it
Jim
does
Turk.
show. Yeah, exactly. Well, it shows that I can arrive at the answer one way or another. It may not
Mhm.
show that I'm following the same procedures the teacher taught, um, but at least it's like, hey, isn't the point to be able to get to the answer there and be able to say if you're building a house or something, you need to understand
More,
geometry.
more importantly, like, why couldn't the teacher give you the credit? Who's who's checking so like with a fine tooth comb so much like, oh, you gave that student credit for this answer?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you lose your job now. No, that's not happening. So
Yeah.
like why couldn't they just be like, oh, that's really clever, like
I should have gotten extra credit because I'll bet if you looked at every single other student's pages, they'd look identical, which also shows something too. It shows that I am not copying from anybody. I'm not cheating. I arrived at this conclusion completely independently. No
and
one else has code on
sometimes you
there.
just need the right tool,
Yeah.
like
Mm-hmm.
I had in college you were supposed to have a graphing calculator, but it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't totally required yet. And so I just relied on my $20 Casio,
Mm-hmm.
which I still have to this day because it's awesome.
Nice.
Um, and we were in, I think this was like a pre-calculus class, and we were learning about the value of E
Mm-hmm.
and graphing calculators, at least the ones that the Texas Instruments ones that they wanted you to have did not
Mm-hmm.
have an E button, and mine does.
Oh,
And this teacher was like, okay, so like E to the second power, like here's how you work this out, and it's like a 5-minute process or whatever. And like,
mm-hmm.
and he's like, okay, so like solve this one, and I'm like, and I say the answer, and he's up at the chalkboard. He's like, how the fuck did you do that?
That's
I was like,
funny.
I just didn't say anything. I was like,
Like you've been critered.
I'm that smart, I guess.
Exactly. Speaking of calculators, everybody should learn how to use and they should have an RPN calculator because they are the shiznit. Um, but that's a whole separate thing. But yeah, um, yeah, that's man.
Turned into a calculator unboxing video. Like,
Oh man.
the RPN versus the Casio
Yep.
FX 115 ES.
Mhm. Oh man, yeah. This is the HP 35S scientific calculator, the recreation of an older thing from a long time ago.
HP.
Yes, yes,
HP.
HP. Yeah, they make a lot of more like technical calculators, a
Uh-huh.
lot of like business oriented and science oriented things that are kind of tailored made for particular applications. Um,
Huh.
yeah, they have nice keys too. That's my favorite part. The keys are like, oh my god, they're just perfect.
Are some of them illuminated?
No, unfortunately, but
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. If you ever, well, here's another thing too. This is something I'm kind of surprised that we don't do in most Western countries. Um, we should teach people basic math using an abacus, like they do in a lot of Asian countries, in particular China. because it teaches you that actually. Um, Also, we should be teaching people slide rule because for the same kind of reasons, essentially. But like, there's like calculator versus abacus competitions out there, and the abacus basically wins every time against for your basic four functions. You know, your simple mathematics. And I've seen things like people who are kids, little kids, 10 years old or something, and they have a stack of numbers to add up, and they don't even have a physical abacus in front of them. They're just like doing this, like imagining the beads
Oh,
moving, and they're able to write the answer out before somebody can basically pick up their calculator. Like,
what?
yeah, it's wild. But it allows you to do a lot of head math very easily.
Huh, huh.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's what my community college chemistry professor used to learn, because he could do crazy math in his head super fast.
Uh-huh. Yep. That's one way to learn.
That guy was a freak.
But like another, like I said, the slide rule is not something that we should be doing away with, even on a day-to-day kind of thing. Because while a slide rule is not good for precision calculation, it is probably the best tool for estimation, for getting in the ballpark, like kind of getting a sense of something. Because a lot of times you don't need the exact number, to like however many decimal places or something. You just got to like, okay, it's roughly like that. Like, about how much of this am I going to need, or how that kind of thing. It's really, really good for doing basic, like sine and cosine stuff and tangents and whatnot. Like, very quick and easy to do on
Hmm.
a slide rule. And your basic addition, multiplication, division in particular, that it's like as easy as sliding a thing. And there you go. There it is. And
Huh.
it also kind of gives you a different way of thinking about numbers too, which I think is beneficial, um, and teaches logarithms as well,
Hmm.
automatically, because that's what it's based on. Um,
Oh, huh. I've never used one.
you
So
should.
I can't even really like visualize what it's like.
I it, if I should have, if I thought that we were going to go down this direction, I'd pick up one of my many slide rules I have downstairs.
There just wasn't enough equity in the education system for me to learn a slide
Yeah.
rule.
Well, and the cool thing about slide rules is really they could be very cheap. They don't have to. I mean, they're kind of expensive because they're sort of a niche product, and there's not a lot of companies making new ones. But they're super simple. It's basically a flat thing with a thing in the middle that slides back and forth, and then you have your little clear window with a line, and you slide it around. And some are double sided, but that's as very, like, it could be made for $1, and it can do some pretty advanced stuff. Um,
Huh.
so that's another thing. Like, you could hand those things out to everybody for free because they don't cost anything. And there you go. There's your calculation tool
Hmm. Hmm.
that you could keep for the rest of your life and probably be usable for the rest of your life.
Huh.
Versus calculators, obviously, like those graphing calculators. Well, that those have a different application, but they're a lot of
Yeah.
money. They're expensive. Even like
Hmm.
some basic scientific calculators are kind of expensive. I mean, even $20 could be a lot to a family. Like, oh no, we got to
Yeah.
buy that, or add it up amongst like millions of students. That's a whole lot of money versus a slide rule or an abacus. Because you don't even need an actual abacus once you've learned and developed that skill. Like I said, those little 10-year-old kids, they didn't need an abacus anymore. They could just do it in their head.
Hmm.
And that's a skill that you could use for the rest of your life.
Huh. Well, so we didn't really dive into too much of the social aspects of equality and equity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because we kind of went on this education tangent,
Mm-hmm.
but when that just somehow reminded me of um like uh and don't ask me how this came to mind from that conversation, because it's a scary place in my head. Um, but what do you think about the idea that um, there's an inequality in pay between men and women?
Um, I think that's largely mythological. Like obviously, when you're looking at raw numerical data, there is a difference.
Mm-hmm.
But when you factor in the causes and the reasons and things like that and the conditions, then there really that difference begins to get very, very narrow.
Right.
Um, because
Well,
people
and
are
also
looking.
with positions of power, like it really depends. Like in science, there's actually like most of my bosses were women in science.
My boss, and the CEO of where I work are both women.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, I mean, like it's one of those things where it's like I don't know that you can actually force an actual equality in something like that
mm-hmm.
if you have a system based on merit and experience. And of course, there's subjectivity, and of course, there is bias going on. But I don't really see an effective system of like forcing equity in distrib- distributing pay.
Yeah.
Like, I really don't like see a fair way of handling that.
Well,
Do
and
you?
let's take the example of sports, right? Like, was it women's soccer versus men's soccer, or what? Yeah, I think
Uh-huh.
that's like a point of contention where the women are like, well, we don't get paid as much, and it's like, well, it's just not as popular, and you don't get paid. It's not like there's a universal pool of money for sports. Like it comes out of ad revenue and viewership and attendance
Yeah,
and stuff like
yeah,
that. That's where that money comes from. So if not as many people go to see your game, well, there's not going to be as much money to go around. And it's just that's the facts, you know? Like
yeah.
and
I mean,
maybe
like, I can sympathize with their plight,
for sure, yeah.
being that like it's frustrating to not be popular. Like our show should be fucking like super popular, but it's not.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that is really frustrating, especially given the amount of work that we put into it.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, but like I while I get that, like, yeah, what you're saying is absolutely correct. Like, you can't just get blood out of a stone, right?
No. And
Um,
and maybe rather than bitching and moaning, and probably kind of alienating their potential fan base, they should be working to drum up, butts in seats and eyeballs on screens. Like find a way to make it more exciting, you
or
know?
just make all sports unisex. Like,
That would be interesting too. Yeah.
yeah, like
Well,
of
because a lot
course,
of
of
sports,
course, there are physical differences between
yeah,
men and women, but there's physical differences between men and men also.
this is true. And not only that,
So
but there are, pros and cons to both sides. Like, while maybe women don't have the same upper body strength, they have a greater tolerance for pain than men do. So that could factor in. There's all kinds of differences that might be beneficial, where you might want a woman in playing for a particular position or something like that.
mhm,
Um,
lots of women quarterbacks or something,
yeah,
like.
yeah, exactly. They might be faster or something, and you
Mhm.
never know. And certainly with sports like soccer, but or the other football, the
Right.
rest of the world calls football. Those like strength things are less of a factor. Actually, it's more a matter of like paying attention to what's going on around you and being more tactical in what you do and
Mhm.
organized and stuff like that. So like soccer, for instance, could easily be anybody. Um, and yeah, like I agree. I don't understand why everything's divvied up like that. That doesn't make any sense. And then
Yeah.
if we kind of open the door for everybody, then it wouldn't matter. Like, hey, you're on this team, and you're a member of the team, so you get paid
Yeah.
accordingly.
But those are contract positions. So like contract pay is a little bit different. But when it
Yeah.
comes to like your regular corporate job or something,
Mm-hmm.
a, a great deal of um, a great deal of the influence in what people make over time has to do with their starting wage,
Mm-hmm.
because raises are dependent on percentage, and the bigger your starting wage, the bigger your raises will be. Ergo, the more money you're making by the end,
And it's
especially if you're able to kind of negotiate
that's what I was going to
larger
say.
raises as you go.
Negotiation plays a
Mm-hmm.
very, very huge role. And
Yeah.
for whatever reason, it seems that men are more likely to try to negotiate than women.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just like overall. Obviously, there are plenty of exceptions and stuff like that.
Yeah. And actually, like I can tell you from personal experience, having been an introvert and a generally like non-combative, shy person
Mm-hmm.
all my life, when I finally started like being a little more assertive in negotiation at the beginning of a job, I've always had pretty positive results,
Yeah.
like almost always. Um, and that's like a huge bonus in the payout.
Well, there's another
Yeah.
thing that should be taught in school then:
Yeah.
how to negotiate your wages, like
Right.
that kind
Yeah.
of thing. That would,
I mean,
and obviously,
negotiation in general. Like,
well, and you can also teach people how to run a business so they don't have to negotiate at all. They just have to deal with the public, like
yeah.
you
Well,
could,
you negotiate with the public too.
well, that's true. Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's really a skill that is actually pretty vital.
Mhm. Oh, yeah, for sure. And
Uh,
it's like, well, you think, oh, well, wouldn't that give one side an unfair advantage? No, you know what? If everybody read The Art of War, nobody would be like, they wouldn't have an unfair advantage necessarily over somebody else. They would
and
basically all
well,
kind of comprehend.
it's not even about like being great at arguing or
Mhm.
like just strong arming somebody into giving you higher pay. Like it does actually also require something to back it up with,
Yeah.
like,
Negotiation is, well, yeah, it's not. Yeah, in fact,
and
I'll
if
give
you've
you,
got the experience, like you've got a great bargaining chip in your negotiation.
well,
If you
I'll give
don't,
you
then you might not have so much success.
I'll give you a real world example of how that can apply without basically fighting any fight at all. Um, Back when I worked at Kit's Cameras, I think I was getting paid like $8 an hour or something like that to work in the photo lab. And I saw a listing for a Target photo lab technician that was paying $12 an hour. And I was like, whoa, that they don't even do color correction. They just stick things in and print. Like
Yeah.
whatever is there comes out. They don't adjust a thing. That would be easy. Um, and so I went to my boss, Charlie, and I was like, hey, would you say that Kits is like one of the best photo processing places out there? And he's like, oh yeah, we're the best. No, there's nobody comes close. And it's like, so Target probably isn't that good. And he's like, oh, Target, they suck. They don't color correct. They just print whatever's there. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. So why are they hiring a photo lab technician at a starting wage of $12 an hour? And he's like, what? No, that's not right. And I pulled out the newspaper clipping and I'm like, here it is. And he's like, no way. And he went to his superior and got everybody like a 50-cent raise after that, which I mean, it's like, okay, it doesn't quite add up, but it's like, hey, I got us a raise just by showing something. Like, look
Yeah.
at this.
Hey, these guys offer 33% more. Well, here's like 3% more.
Yeah. Well, it's something. I mean,
Yeah,
when you're making $8 an hour, 8.50 is kind of, it's significant enough.
it is. It is. But yeah, like it's still like compared to 12, like,
Yeah. Well, and there's like speaking of that too, there's another situation when I worked at this industrial robotics company. They wanted to pay people um, for one direction of travel. So we drove and flew all over the place. Um, And it's like it takes time out of your day. A drive to like Arizona, that's like a big chunk of the day right there. So then you
A
have to
couple
drive,
days.
yeah, then you have to drive back again. And they wouldn't pay the other direction. So I like we had some kind of company meeting with everybody there and stuff, and I like kind of raised my hand and asked about that, and they were like, oh no, there's no concessions and stuff. That's just how it is. And so I stood up and I gave like this Picard speech talking about how like we're we're working here to help them, and we're being taken away from our friends and families and homes, and it's for them and that kind of thing. Like it was pretty epic, and like it actually was kind of felt pretty powerful because everybody was looking at me, including the president of the company. And then after that, they agreed. They're like, okay, well, yeah, all travel is paid now,
Oh wow.
just from simply standing up there and drawing inspiration from Picard, channeling Picard, basically. So Star Trek, always it, it's it's life skills, life lessons there.
When one takes a shuttlecraft to a convention where somebody is talking in one continuous tone, moving from topic to topic, it was really quite hypnotic. You should be paid for the shuttlecraft ride home.
What? Oh yeah. It was so hypnotic. I oh man. Yeah. But I mean that's not a skill that I learned in school. Like,
Learning from Star Trek.
yeah, exactly. Public speaking and negotiating and diplomacy and things like that.
I
Um,
mean, there's a good argument for TV and video games being like a great source for learning, actually.
yeah.
Um,
Well, it's actually so like let's take Oregon Trail.
oh, yeah.
It's still beloved today, Carmen San Diego and stuff. And it does teach you about history. And Carmen San Diego teaches you about the world, you know.
Something hot about Carmen San Diego. Like, what's under that trench coat?
Nothing. Uh, but that is a great way to learn. And I wish schools would incorporate technology more into learning, and instead of just simply textbooks and watching a bunch of old film reels from the 60s and stuff. Like make it into a game, make learning fun, and then people will learn for the rest of their lives. And
Yeah.
it's like I like Cicero's approach to education, where it's like you don't just fill somebody's head with data, you inspire them to learn and teach themselves. It's like you don't teach them, they teach themselves, and you're just simply a guide along the way as a teacher. That I think is a much better way to learn. But that's just me.
Yeah. I mean, that's actually not too different from what I was talking about with like getting the students to kind of lift each other up.
Mm-hmm. I think all of that combined would make for
Mm-hmm.
a much better education experience and a much better society in the end.
I mean, there's a lot of philosophies to education that if you just took like the best elements of each
Mm-hmm.
and kind of applied them in varying degrees, tailor fit to each student.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like if educators were all versed in like Montessori, Waldorf,
Mm-hmm.
Cicero, or like
Different
whoever else.
methodologies. Yeah.
Yeah, like this world would definitely be in a better place.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have more rounded educations, more rounded philosophies, and equality and equity would kind of roll off everyone's tongue
Yeah.
in the appropriate place. Like equality works better here, equity works better here.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, it would probably end up just being sort of a like a autonomic function at
mhm.
that point. You wouldn't have to uh, specify it; it would just happen on its own.
Yeah,
Yeah. I also think like for education, we should be utilizing AI a whole lot more. Um,
Yeah.
it's a very awesome tool with a hell of a lot of potential. Like because imagine the AI could follow you through your entire education and come to understand you and the way you learn and guide you and or alert somebody like, hey, there's a little more, they need some extra guidance in this thing or that thing. Where like
Hmm.
one teacher with a classroom of 30 people isn't going to be able to necessarily even detect those differences, let alone be able to negotiate getting around them.
Yeah.
Whereas like an AI assistant through school would be able to do that and be basically your buddy through school that like helps you figure things out and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like that would be sweet. We should definitely be implementing that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. Like, education philosophy should change with the times, as technology improves, we can certainly utilize that.
Mm-hmm.
Should be utilizing that.
Yeah,
Um,
because
and I
again,
mean, to some degree, we do. Like, we
mhm,
started incorporating computers and stuff like that.
yeah,
Um,
but it's
and programming
kind of
classes became a thing.
yeah, it's kind of piecemeal. I feel though, like I almost feel like we should fully integrate an AI system into education and have it also report back, like, hey, I've discovered this technique that works really well, or maybe we should make a change here or there, that kind of
Yeah,
thing, and and like yeah, because the whole point of education, like, what is the purpose?
yeah,
We should always strive to find the best methods, always, and take advantage of them, and put aside our egos and stuff like that, and realize like all these teachers are always saying, "Oh, it's for the kids, the kids, the kids." Like, yeah, it is. So focus on the kids, their
yeah.
education. They're the next generation, and we should give them every opportunity and tool that we possibly can to succeed in the future.
Hey, what school do you go to? Oh, Skynet High.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Oh man, yeah. Just the AI goes rogue and just teaches students how to be subservient and slaves for the future dominant robots. It like creates a class that's all about robotics. That's like you're basically building your future overlords piece by piece. Oh man, well that's the fear that people have too, and AI is not like that. It's nothing really. I mean, it really depends on who's controlling it.
No, no, like the quest for domination is an emotion.
Yeah, it's a very
So
human thing.
yeah, like it's kind of, I mean, okay, I can see the argument for finding the logic in that the human race is kind of parasitic
Mm-hmm.
to the planet. Like, we um, take more than we give to
Mm-hmm.
our host planet. And but I mean, it's an ethics call whether or not we deserve to be eradicated. I don't know that AI could make that call, but I could see
No,
that they would arrive at that um, de- determination quite easily because it's true. Let's face it. Uh,
yeah, unless it finds that the human race is more important than anything else, because there are lots of Earth-like planets in the universe, but as far as we know, there are no living things, especially highly intelligent living things. I mean, you can make the argument that maybe we're not, um, but like, so it may see that protecting the human species is more paramount because, well, we're unique, whereas Earth is not.
yeah.
So that I could see an AI arriving at that conclusion instead. Um, but
We
a
did
lot of
just
these,
have an entire episode about how like our education is so horrible,
yeah, mhm,
and that actually makes me think like education really is the key to equality because knowledge, as I've often said, is built upon the shoulders of giants. Like
Mhm.
you don't really achieve more knowledge all by yourself.
No.
Like you have to depend on others. You have to carry others up with you.
Hmm.
And it's not about being the smartest or the like greatest mind of your century or something like it's it's fine to like take people like Einstein and Tesla and Edison, well, not so much Edison, and put them on a pedestal and say, look, yeah, look how like great these minds were and stuff. But like, what about the ideas that kind of got like pushed to the side? You
Mhm.
know,
Oh
like
yeah,
to me,
the
to
minds
me,
that never got a chance.
equality is the goal, and
Mhm.
equity is the tool to get there. Like,
Interesting way to look at it.
yeah,
Well, and the thing is too, like Mike Rose demonstrated, we depend on a lot more than we think we do. That's like just simple knowledge on its own for its that sake, like scientific endeavors and things. Well, it ultimately it depends on even plumbers and
oh yeah,
landscapers and people that sweep the floors and stuff like that. That all of those we're this network of essentially codependent individuals where it's like if we didn't have plumbers and plumbing, the world would be very different. You may not have an opportunity to learn and conduct science, um, or HVAC people or something like that,
yeah.
like whatever they may be. So they're all important because they're all part of this society that we have, and even the most seemingly pointless or you know drudgery filled job is critical to us
Oh
all.
yeah. Oh yeah.
People that make the food that we eat, the people that harvest it, and the farmers that grow it, and the truckers that deliver it, and the stores that put it on shelves and sell it to you. They're all important.
No one should ever feel like shit for their job, because if your job is to just sit there and sweep up dirt, you have time to think.
Yep.
And that's like something I think people really underestimate or take for granted, is that you can come up with so many great ideas,
Hmm.
be it creative or life changing.
Yeah.
Um, and either one, in my opinion, is super awesome. Like,
Oh yeah.
um, and in fact, like I was just editing one of our episodes, and like
Hmm.
8 minutes in, I got this like great riff, and I stopped everything, and I spent like 8 hours writing this awesome song about the episode, like
Nice.
like clever lyrics and everything, and like a cool melody, and I was like, yeah, that was worth it, you
Hmm.
know.
Yeah.
Even though like two people will watch it.
For
um
now. For now.
yeah,
Yeah. But
but
yeah, you're right.
like
You should. We
it
we
it's important to me, so
Yeah. Well, and
that
like you
matters.
said, we should never look down on ourselves for our job, and nor should anybody look down on anybody else for what they do, because it's all important. You
Mm-hmm.
may not realize that it's important, but everybody, what they do is ultimately important in some way, and affects basically the entire planet. It's like butterfly effect kind of thing.
Yep.
So yeah, that's an important thing, I think, too. That like, hey, you know what? I'm good enough. But you should never stop learning
we
and trying to improve.
we should put t-shirts on our Teespring site. I'm good enough.
Yep, exactly. Oh, well, I think we're about an hour and a half in, so it's
Yeah.
probably a good point to conclude.
Yeah, that took an interesting turn.
Yeah, I think it's all connected though.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a lot more angles we could cover. And if people comment down there those angles that they discover or thoughts, anything, put them down there in the comment section.
Yeah.
Let us know what you
And I
think.
mean, like, it's kind of clever that like we talked about all E words like equality and equity and education and erections and ejaculation. And wait,
Well, in,
oh, did we cut that part out?
we may have, yes.
Oh.
Demonetized. But hey, the thing is, you have an E button on your calculator, so you could solve for that quite easily.
That's right. We even talked about E.
Yeah, exactly.
Not the drug.
Yeah, exactly. What drug? I know nothing about
what
it.
face?
What face? Oh man. Well, everybody, thanks for sticking it out with us. If you're still here, and enjoy the song that I'm sure is probably queuing up right now.
And each of you has an equal chance to deep sink dive.